And now let's move on to a practical implementation of a gamified system within the context of a classroom. The first thing that many teachers definitely have faced with is, of course, especially during COVID, the fact that students are cheating. Now the question is, why do students cheat? First, because they can, obviously, but I think there are certain elements that have to be satisfied in order for a student to want to cheat. The first one is they cheat when they think there's too much that's asked of them. So the amount of information to be learned is way too much. Therefore, it's fair game to cheat because you couldn't study it anyway without a grip sheet. The second one would be if they don't see the point of learning that. So the credibility is in question there, and therefore they cheat because they think this is pointless anyway, so why should I learn? I think I better cheat. The third one is the stakes are very high. So if I screw up, if I slip up this exam, then my end of year mark is going to suffer tremendously. All these contribute to the fact that students actually do cheat. Now, there is something very important that is also in play here and that we should discuss, and this is the trap of averages. In Hungary, we have a system from 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best mark. Now, all students are measured along this scale. Let's take this example of a student who does very well in September and October and receives 2 5s in, say, biology. And then, for some reason, he or she slips up and doesn't succeed in one of the submissions, one of the projects, one of the in-class tests, or one of the things to be submitted. In this case, he or she receives a 1, and now the average drops to 3.6. The question is, how many more 5s do you think the student needs in order to get back to level of 4.5 in terms of average when a teacher can award the best mark, that is 5, to the student? Well, here you can see the answer. You need 5 more 5s in order to get there. Therefore, there is a very interesting double speak in terms of how we approach assessment and what we communicate to students, because on the one hand we say it's really fair to slip up. I mean, it's a process, it's a work in progress, therefore having mistakes or making mistakes is just part of the deal that we all accept and agree that we do, because, you know, who doesn't make mistakes? Even teachers do sometimes. Now, on the other hand, however, there is this very clear system that shows students that if they slip up just once, their mark is going to be almost irredeemable for the rest of the year. And especially when it's in year 11, 12, when the marks count in terms of their results, that would define whether they could go to university or they have to pay or get a free place at university, then the stakes are even higher. And of course, they cheat. Now, what can we do besides giving feedback that's already touched upon? How do we design a system that will make students feel comfortable? One of the answers, possible answers, could be gamification. So we're going to discuss the definitions, different possible definitions of gamification, what game elements are, and what pedagogical value they carry for us. The first one, of course, is definitions. There are 2 main trends, or 2 main schools, if you like. The one is game-based learning. I think it's rather game-based learning than gamification, which implies learning through games, gaining skills by playing certain games. Jim McGonigal is a wonderful person who is an advocate of that, and it's absolutely fine. The second one is what I call gamification, is using game elements in non-game contexts. Now, of course, the question here is what the difference is. I think essentially in terms of pedagogical value or implementation in the classroom, game-based learning focuses on gamifying the content of education. They're providing games through which you can learn and develop certain skills, whereas gamification is gamifying the process of learning. How you gain, how you get feedback, what sort of assessment system you work with. And I think the first one is specific. So you have certain games that develop certain skills or help you create certain skill sets, whereas gamification is universal because it's just a system that's adaptable to all educational contexts, essentially. Now let's see what the basic elements are. I'm sure you've heard this many times. Just let's go through this just in case. Of course, it's point levels, badges, and leaderboards. These are the things that are parts of a gamified system. But let's see, of course, how. I'm going to give you a step-by-step introduction to gamification in the classroom. So if you decide to gamify the learning process, whatever subject, whatever age group, whatever educational context you might be teaching in, here is what I think you could do. First of all, choose an online tool. I think it's really crucial that there is a tool that students can track their progress in on 24/7 basis. So of course, unless you're teaching very young students, very pupils, where it might be better to not use an online tool, but rather to create this gamified context in the classroom and say stick it up in the wall so that students can see it, pupils can see it all the time. So steer away from day-to-day planning. One issue is that we usually plan for a whole year. So you have everything, the curriculum, you know what you need to achieve by the end of the year, and we plan for the next day or the next day, so you know what the next lesson is going to be. I think an essential part of educational planning is mid-level, mid-term planning is something that's missing. So I think you need to steer away from day-to-day planning and try to plan study periods. I'm going to show you how to do that and what I mean by that exactly. Now, decide what learning outcomes you'd like to measure. So what is it that you want students to actually learn to develop in? Reading skills, mathematical skills, what sort of data or information you would like them to inquire about and learn exactly. And then you design tools and design techniques to track student progress. Now, this definition is as vague as could be because I don't think there are certain tools that are better than others. Of course, it's horses for courses. So whatever sort of tools you think might best assess what students do or what you would do otherwise, I think could be implemented here. It could be a vocabulary test, it could be a project work, it could be essays to be handed in, it could be in-class quizzes, it could be homework. So whatever you think would best help students acquire those skills that you already have laid down, this is the way to go. Then you have to fit assessment to the point system. Now here, everything that you do within the 1 month study period should be weights and they will be given points. So in terms of mathematics, what we saw at the beginning is that when you have the rule of averages, especially if you're doing percentages, so imagine you have two 85% submissions and then suddenly you forget to submit your next work and it's 0%, then it's even more hellish than the one that I outlined for you. If you are trapped in there, then of course it's about averages. Now in this system, it's all about addition. So whatever students do, is added to whatever students have already achieved. Now of course you might claim, well, if you don't punish students for not knowing something, how on earth are you going to force them, or how are you going to make them learn this? I think the same thing happens here. Only when students gain 0 points for their assessment, there's a different type of dialogue that is going on between you and the student. So it means you have to try and understand what the problem was, and you're trying to make them work out another way of actually acquiring those skills and learning those things. So I think it's a better pedagogical discussion than simply saying it's a one end of story. And when you have a point system, and I'm going to show you in the accompanying document what a point system could be like, then you need to very carefully weigh the points. Remember, if it's too easy, there's no motivation. If it's too difficult, it's frustrating for students. You have goals, you have to publish these goals, and any types of assessment with provisional dates so that students can count on them and know exactly what's going to happen to him or her when in a calendar that you do. And finally, you go about your daily business and administer these points as students do the work. And finally, see how well they achieved and what they have reached. Now let's see the pedagogical gain. Now, what do you achieve? I've been doing this for nearly 12 years now, and I've trained over 5,000 teachers, and there are more than 100,000 students in Hungary working in some form of gamified assessment system. And there is a reason why this is becoming and has been so popular among teachers. And of course, the first one, there is positive reinforcement. So rather than punishing students, you appreciate what they've done. So anything they add to their already existing body of knowledge is represented in a metaphorical form. In the one or the application I'm using, it's in the form of building a house, building a building. Now, of course, there is reduced stress in assessment because students know exactly what is going to happen to them when, and also they know that they don't have to worry about slipping up, because the worst thing that could happen is for them not to have achieved or gained any points at one point of assessment that the teacher gives them. And then there is continuous assessment in practice, which is really difficult to implement if you haven't done this, but here the system kind of forces you, because you have to think of education or think of student progress in terms of months rather than classes, or rather than just one point of assessment. And this continuous assessment is going to have students measure their progress in a much clearer way. And finally, I think this is the most important point in introducing gamification in the classroom, is that you're not going to measure the absolute value of student knowledge. So you never worry about what students know, but you're going to give feedback on the added value of education. So you're always going to give feedback on what students have learned. And this is an inclusive form of education, because everyone gets an equal chance. So depending on where you start from, your chances of getting ahead are exactly the same. Someone's who is much more advanced for some reason in that particular subject than you are. So it's a fair, inclusive form of assessment, which of course gives opportunities and possibilities to students to develop even further. And it has been shown many a time that this is actually what is happening. So all in all, this is the end of this short presentation about gamification and why it and how it could be used in the classroom. Please check out the accompanying document where you see a study period, how it is planned, and of course I'm going to talk about and describe some of the dangers and traps of implementing gamification without a very clear pedagogical concept. So thank you very much for bearing with me, and I'll see you around.